Hello everyone, my name is Leslie Seabrook and my blog is called Leslie's StampinTrix, and I'm here today doing a Facebook Live and YouTube video to show you, well, it was a new to me technique called no line watercoloring. So as many of you may know, when you do watercoloring, you need some special paper often, and stays on ink. And I wanted to try it. I had heard about the technique of creating a watercolor image but without a line. So I'm just going to pull this up for you so you get a close-up of the picture. As you can see, there's no black line here from the stamped image that I used, and I've watercolored it. So how did I get that look? So that's what no line watercoloring is all about. So I'm going to just take you through a couple of quick tips that I figured out as I was learning this technique myself. So the first item that I think you need, I prefer, is this shimmery cardstock. Stampin' Up! Sells it. I'm trying to think exactly what the number is. Let me look. Oh, it's item number 101910, and it's on page 140 of our current catalog, or current annual catalog. So if you can see it, I'm just trying to help the light catch it here. There's these shimmery qualities to the cardstock, but it is heavyweight cardstock, so it's like all of our cardstock. So it handles the water and the ink mix, but it also creates the shimmery texture creates a blend potential, basically, for this paper. So this I personally prefer. I'm sorry, I think I just bumped the camera there. I personally prefer this paper. You can certainly use watercolor paper as well, but watercolor paper is a lot thicker. The fibers aren't as close together. And if you really want your colors to blend and bleed together, it's a beautiful product. I just want a little bit of blending with this technique for the card that I've created right here. And as I said, I just wanted to create an all pink and red card. I didn't want the black outline of the stamped image. So I used a stamp set called Happiness Abounds. Sorry, I should have taken it out of its plastic. Happiness Abounds is on page 109. Yeah, shimmery white cardstock's on page 140. Sorry, and this is on 109. I think I mixed that up. Anyways, sorry, I know it's catching a glare here, but if you can tell, the line art of these images are really lovely. So I did play around, and that's the other point that I would suggest, is to just play around and find stamp sets that you love to work with. But the line art of that gave lots of open area to stamp the image and then color it in. So I want to show you just a little sample here that I tried. So the card that I created is a polished pink and sweet sorbet. So these colors here are polished pink, and this is full strength polished pink. This is stamped off, so when you stamp your ink pad and stamp it on, you get full strength, and then you stamp it right away again, and you get this lighter image. It's called second generation stamping. And then I stamped it again right away, or I just like positioned it and stamped it. And if you can see, it's quite light. Now you can still see the lines there to guide you, but I think I prefer the second generation stamping. So I have tried it with a couple of other colors. This one is Flirty Flamingo. And if you noticed, when you move to third generation stamping of Flirty Flamingo, you really lose some of the lines. So depending on how good your vision is, you might be able to get away with third generation stamping. But as I said, I think I prefer the second generation stamping. And then this one is Gorgeous Grape. So again, I just sort of played around with a couple of different, and I think I might have some Highland Heather in there. So play around and pick and choose which you think might work best. So another little thing that I want to show you right off the top before I start actually watercoloring is, I hope I'm holding it up okay. Here you can see a lot more blending in this one versus this one is actually I watercolored first and then I watercolored again to get the deeper color. So I'll just show you on my little example here of how I started to create my flowers. This combination is Gorgeous Grape and Orchid Oasis. So you're going to need a water painter. It's on page 129 of our current annual catalog. And the trick with watercoloring, I think, at the best of times, is always the concept of less is more. So if you add a little less water, you can go over it, but if you add too much, then you're going to have a bit of a swampy mess. So if you saw there, I just sort of squeezed the ink pad together to get a pool of ink. Didn't squeeze this one quite enough to get a pool of ink forming in the lid of my stamp pad. So depending on how juicy your stamp pad is, how much ink is in it will determine how much transfer that you get over here. So I'll show you what I mean by less is more. So the water painter is really an awesome little tool because the reservoir for the water is in this section here. Your paintbrush end is here, and you literally just squish a little bit of water into your lid and then blend it into the ink. So when I say less is more, I mean that you can always add more color, but you can rarely take it away. So oftentimes I will practice before I even begin. I'll sort of have, I'm just going to, hopefully, I'm just checking to make sure you can see here. I will often just paint off of the image and see how much color I have before I paint onto the image. So right here in this area, it's obviously the more concentrated color, and without as much water you're going to get a more concentrated purple image. So I think I'll sort of create the center of the flower with this concentrated ink. But then I'll go back in, grab a little bit more water to color in the petals here. Now you can certainly pull the color from this outside image, or outside of the image here, these lines. You can certainly pull the water, the color in, but I find that it's a little bit more difficult to control, and sometimes, depending on how much water is in your brush, it can bleed out past the line and distort the image so that you don't have that same sort of crisp edge. So if I just set this down for a minute and I pull this back in, I think you'll see what I mean. You can kind of see the edge here, right? However, if you just glance at the card, you're not quite sure, is that the edge of the stamp or is that watercoloring? So I personally like that. Maybe you would like to blur the edges, and so, you know, as I said, give it a go, play. So if you pull in, so to just clean your brush, I should say that first, you just squish out a little bit of water onto a tissue, and then your brush is clean and ready to start picking up the next color. So I'm going to pick up the Orchid Oasis here now. This is a very dark color, so again, just use a little bit of scrap paper there to just see what your color intensity is before you add it to your project. So initially I thought that it would be really neat to do the centers, excuse me, the Orchid Oasis. This one, I don't know if you can tell, I think I added a little bit too much water. But the other funny thing about watercoloring is it really changes as it dries. So what you think you're going to get and what you end up getting are often two different things. So less is more. Just maybe experiment on some scrap pieces of paper first. See how different colors behave together. Like I loved the combination of polished pink and sweet sorbet. I'm not sure I would have really grabbed those two colors to go together if I was stamping. I don't know, one's sort of red, like orangey red, and the other's very pink. But I love them on a flower together. So you really never know what you're going to get. And right here now I'm layering the gorgeous grape over top of this area here that was the Orchid Oasis. So I may have 3 or 4 very different flowers here. This one I colored last night simply because I wanted to show you what a light layering of color could provide, and then what it's like to go back in after it's dried and add in a little bit more color. It really gives a little bit more depth. Now, again, with watercoloring, I really thinking I'd love to take a course on watercoloring, because I am just dabbing the color on here because I want it to have more of a wash look to it. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for, that's why I'm using a stamp, right? Because I want this image to be a little bit abstract and not perfect. But if you're somebody that likes very crisp lines, but a real wash of color, then you may choose to do something like heat embossing, or use StaysOn, so that you can get a very crisp edge, and your colors will just blend, but they won't blend past the crispness of the edge, if you know what I mean. So if you look at these, they're all very different. This one I definitely blobbed on the water a little bit more, and you see the look that it's taken on, versus this one I didn't use as much water. But this one I'm feeling like I can see the lines too much. So I'm going to go back in. Now you saw me do this just a few minutes ago, so that's how quickly it dries. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's not like the watercolor paper, which our Fluid 100 watercolor paper, which you can really saturate that paper with water, and you will not get any pilling of the fibers of the paper. And then you can add so much water and really get a blend of colors happening, and create real new colors. But I just want to create a wash look, and I just want to move the color across the surface of the paper. So that's why I'm using the shimmery. And I think just by adding that second layer right there, it's not really wet. It was a fairly light layer. But as I said, right from the beginning, if you do a little bit and let it dry, and then go back in and touch it up, you get a better result. You get a little bit more control. So I think I wanted to show you this one as well. This is, I think, Highland Heather and Orchid Oasis, versus this is Gorgeous Grape and Orchid Oasis. So sometimes I think that the color intensity, because Gorgeous Grape by itself is a fairly significant color. It's a fairly significant purple. And Highland Heather is much lighter. But remember, remember, when you add water, it's all going to disperse the color pigments, right? So you will end up with a lighter color here. So I want to move on and show you something extra that I figured out. So as I said, I love to work with the shimmery white cardstock, or the shimmery cardstock, just so that I get this blending of color moving across the surface of the paper. But if I add it to the card, just like I'm going to add here, very same design. So this is just, I think this was 3 3/4 wide by 4 1/4, because this is a 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. So no, this might have been 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. Yes, this one was 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. Whereas this one, I just wanted to be a little bit bigger because I wanted to create a bit of a layer underneath. So it's 3 3/4 by 4 1/4. But I've got this shimmery cardstock on the front, but maybe when I open up my card and I want a white image inside or a white piece of paper inside to put my message on, and I also want an image, can I also use the thick white, basic white cardstock? Because I don't really want to waste all my shimmery white cardstock on the inside for just one little image and writing, correct? I want to save that paper. So I thought, well, can you do the same sort of watercolor wash with no line on thick cardstock? And yes, you can. And so here's a few tricks. I'm just going to grab a swig of water here. Sorry about that. Thank you. So I just used my Orchid Oasis. And I'll just show you again. Stamped. So I've got it on the other side, but I stamped once and then I stamped off again. So that gave me just the lighter of the two to work with. And as I said, you could probably go 3 generations of stamping. I just personally like a little bit of line showing. So that's what I did for this one. So you'll see that you can still do the same technique with your water painter, but just really be careful to not add too much water. Again, the whole concept of less is more. And I think I'll just pull in a piece of paper here just to give me a little scratch area. Because this, and I'm just going to show you on here really quickly. Do you see how it sort of starts to pill the paper a little bit? It's really cool how it blends around, but that's a fair bit of water that I added there. And this, even though this is thick cardstock, it doesn't have that shimmery coat on it. So it's not going to blend the water, it's not going to blend the color the same, because the color and the water is going to soak into the paper. Does that make sense? So if you're getting a lot of water and color soaking into your paper, you're not going to get the same look, right? You're going to get that paper is going to start to pill a little bit. So I mean, I have definitely added a really super light wash of color on our regular weight cardstock. And if you're not trying to blend it and, blend colors together, it's completely fine, because you're just adding a little wash of color, like just a little dot of color to give it a watery look. But if you want your colors to blend and move, then you definitely need the shimmery. So I don't know if you can really tell there. It's a little different to the shimmery cardstock in how it adheres to the, or how it looks on the paper. But I think you get the idea. I just wanted to do just the one image here, only in Orchid Oasis, just to match the Orchid Oasis card base that I had. So I'm not trying to blend color. I'm just adding it in, just washing it on, and it hangs out on the paper just fine. So there's a little extra trick for you, that if you want to use your thick basic white cardstock, you certainly can. Just try not to blend too many colors together, because that's when your paper will start to decompose and break down. So that's why my favorite is the shimmery white. So that's that card, but I do want to show you one more thing on using the thick basic white paper. So this is a watercolor wash on thick basic white. So I'm going to pull it up so you can hopefully see it. Again, I didn't want a black image outlining. I wanted to keep the overall card very light, and I wanted to use colors from our Subtles color palette. So I stamped with one of our neutrals. It was Sahara Sand, and then I filled in the bunny with Sahara Sand, Petal Pink, Mint Macaron, and Pool Party. So I'm just holding it up, hopefully not moving it too much, so that you can see that, again, it's not perfect. It's totally meant to just be a wash of color going over the image. So could you create this with water pencils? Absolutely, I'm sure you could. I just find that the ink pads are really fun to work with, because you can stamp your image, like, you know, stamp it in the Orchid Oasis like I did, and then just color it in with the Orchid Oasis, and it's all done with just your ink pad and your water painter. So one thing I wanted to say about this watercolor wash on thick, so this is thick basic cardstock, or white cardstock, as I said, it is a little bit difficult to color in a larger image like his face without getting brush lines, because the water actually does sort of soak into the paper, sort of like I was saying a little bit earlier with the shimmery white. There's a coating or something on it which allows the color to it sits on top, it blends in, or it soaks in, but it doesn't soak in quite as quickly as the thick. So I wanted to show you this one. This is Pear Pizzazz, and this stamp set, sorry, I should have told you that the cute little bunny came from our Playing in the Rain bundle, and then this is the Dainty Flowers bundle. So if I can hold it steady up here, I stamped it in Pear Pizzazz, and then I stamped off once. This is also just a second generation stamp off of Pear Pizzazz. But the difference between this one and this one is that I used a blender pen on this one. So I don't know if you can tell looking at it, but the it's really hard to tell if I'm holding this too close or just right for you guys. So hopefully it's just right. The blender pen definitely smears the color, whereas when you add a watercolor wash and you just dab on your color, it's like a blotch of color. Does that make sense? Like it's just sort of a little bit of ink added on. So that's why I said I really like just using my ink pads, because if I'm working with one color and I'm stamping with it or whatever, and I want to just add a little bit of color to it, I can. So this one, I decided to stamp in soft seafoam. So I don't know if you can tell a difference between the soft seafoam and the pear pizzazz. There is a little bit of a difference here. You know, I can see it close up here. I don't know if the camera will pick it up. But I really like just being able to just have my water painter and my ink pad. I've already stamped it, and now I just want to go in and quickly touch up those leaves and just add a little bit more green to those leaves. And so I'm just sort of rinsing out my brush there. And then I'm bringing in some Flirty Flamingo. Oh, let's squeeze that a little bit more. And again, just squeezing the barrel of this water painter to add a little bit of water to the lid, and then it creates a puddle of color. And then you can just touch up those flowers a little bit. Again, knowing that you can go back and add another layer of color in a few minutes if you wish. It's kind of nice to just do the tap of color, get it onto the area, then go back and take a look at it and see how much more color it needs. And after it dries, knowing that you can go right back in and you can touch it up again. So I'm just cleaning off my brush here for a minute and dabbing out my ink pad. I just dab out the water a little bit there. So the Dainty Flowers bundle is in our new mini catalog, as well as that Playing in the Rain that I just showed you a minute ago. And it comes with dies. So I use this image here. There it is on the stamp. And it has the Dainty Delight dies. And so you can just cut those out after you've stamped it and watercolored it. You can just cut it out with the die. And then it creates just a nice little image to put onto a card. And again, as I said, it's not perfect. It's just a little watercolor wash. Adds a little bit of visual interest and a little bit of depth. So the thank you came from the Go-To Greetings stamp set. And this is first generation, second generation, and third generation stamping of the sentiment with the die cut image beside it. So as I said, I just love working with the ink pads because I'm already using the colors on my card. I'm just stamping away. And then I just decide, well, I think I'll add a little bit of a watercolor wash to that. And it holds up quite perfectly because this one is shimmery white or shimmery cardstock on a thick white card base. But our little Playing in the Rain friend here is directly washed on our thick basic white cardstock. So they all handle the color well. It's just you taking the time to blend and add color with your water painter, which will determine whether or not it starts to sort of degrade and smear and whatnot. So use a very light touch and layer up your color. Go back and add another layer as you go and play around with it. I had a lot of fun doing it. As I said, it was new to me, and I really wanted to give it a go so that I didn't have that black line from the stamped image. I just wanted to see if I could create a watercolor image, but with no line. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned a little bit, and I hope these little tricks and tips are helpful to you. certainly please drop me a comment. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I will put a link to my blog in the description below, and you can certainly ask me a question directly on my blog as well if you'd like to leave a comment. So thanks so much for watching, and have a super day. Bye-bye.